in case you've missed it somehow. The one, the only Stellar Blade has had the review embargo lift. People have posted their reviews. In general, right now, it seems to be floating from the numbers I've seen floating on social media. It floats around like an 8 out of 10 for most reviewers, it seems. You guys were telling me that the IGN review is funny, so we're gonna watch that one. But I did see one review that perfectly encapsulated my experience with the game. So I did a video on the demo that they released, and my experience with the demo was that I really liked it. I thought the game was way better than I was expecting it to be. Huge set pieces, very cinematic, a really solid combat system. Like I was expecting it to mostly be about Booba and that's about it, but no, like there's actually a really good game here, and there's also Booba, so it's everything you could possibly want. My experience with the group of people that are most excited for this game, shall we say, has been that there is so much toxicity related to this game that it's not even really something I want to cover in a lot of detail. And it's not from the group you might think. There are toxic people who are like, you should cancel it because they're wearing skinny, tight clothes and that's whatever, that's toxic or toxic masculinity or whatever they say. There's those people who I agree are just obnoxious and annoying. But then the other group are the people that are such simps for this that it's like totally asinine. There was one guy that I mentioned this on stream before, but there was one guy that responded to a comment I made in the video where I said like, yeah, the gameplay is really good, but then, you know, the booba and the butts, it appeals to that primal monkey brain part of the part of your brain that just likes that sort of thing and makes you go, ooh, ooh, ah, I love that. And a guy commented, was like, actually, Luke, this is really disappointing to hear from you because we are not apes. I will have you know, we were made in the image of God and I am not a monkey. I simply appreciate the female form. And it was like, oh my God, dude, chill out. It was very, very obnoxious. But this guy, Imran Khan, you probably have seen him around X and Twitter and everything, senior editor or former senior editor at Game Informer, did a review for GameSpot as well. He got this response to his review. Your opinion has no value. Please go and simp for Hades 2, hypocrite. GameSpot has no value. Cry more racisms and sexisms, pathetic loser. What do you think he gave the game as a score? You'd read that and you might think like a 4 out of 10 or a 3 out of 10. No. He gave the game an 8 out of 10, said it does a lot of really good stuff. A strong battle system and exciting moments make Stellar Blade more than just an imitator. It's a positive review. He gives it an 8 out of 10, echoes some of the other bad things that other people have brought up. Every individual section just goes on a little too long. Environmental variety in the free roam areas is sorely needed, especially for a global adventure. Often changes mechanics for small sections, but not always successfully. And so it's a varied review, but overall, he calls it great. And this guy is like, wow, your opinion has no value. You simp. Like, it's just stupid. It's just stupid. But that's been my experience as well, is that some people are going to play this and just have a good time, but the vocal minority that are like the incel bros just make this something I just don't want to bother with. You know, it's like, I'll play it myself and have fun, but I don't want to deal with those people. And so I'm good. I'm not gonna mess with it. But now I'm interested because you guys are saying that the IGN review is funny. So we're gonna see what this one's like and check it out. Let's give it a shot.
In his own words, Stellar Blade director Hyung-tae Kim is a visualist, not a storyteller. Meaning, whatever Stellar Blade lacks in its story, he's tried to make up for in its gameplay. It was a refreshingly transparent statement, and after playing through Stellar Blade, it's also one that I find mostly accurate. This is a gorgeous action game with excellent character and monster design and exciting combat that continues to evolve in fun and interesting ways across the 30-hour adventure. Its story, light RPG elements, and the actual substance of its characters, on the other hand, fall well short of the high marks set by its combat. Stellar Blade certainly isn't pristine, and in some spots it's positively dull, but it's sharp in the areas that matter the most.
That all seems relatively placid as a take. I think from the demo, my impression was that this was probably going to land in like, I would have guessed, I think I said in the video, probably around the 8 out of 10 mark, just because I think the combat's really good, but nobody's thinking that the story is going to be super compelling or anything. And usually if you have a really solid combat system and then like a fine story or a forgettable story, you usually land in that 8 out of 10 mark. Sometimes you get a game like maybe an Elden Ring, which has phenomenal gameplay, and then the story is like, I don't know what's going on, but I love it. And in that case, it can still be a 10 out of 10. But with this, it's like, yeah, it's a really good combat system. Nothing like generation defining or anything in terms of gameplay, but it's solid enough. And the story is meh. So like an 8 out of 10, it's really good. I think that's totally fine. But Jose, but girl look hot. So 10 out of 10, but jiggle physics, 10 out of 10, right?
Stellar Blade's setting is a familiar one. The Earth is a post-apocalyptic wasteland, and humans have fled to a colony in space. You play as Eve, a member of the 7th Airborne Squad, who is sent to the surface to eliminate the threat of the Naytiba.
I know this isn't technically canon, but I'd like to think that this is basically the like alternative ending to WALL-E, because like human civilization leaves Earth, goes into space, lives on a giant spaceship. I'd like to think like if WALL-E failed and they all crash back down to Earth, this is the alternative ending. It would make for a really interesting Pixar movie, I'll tell you what.
Horrific monsters that laid claim to Earth once the humans fled. What follows is a predictable tale that sees Eve linking up with the last remnants of human civilization and collecting 4 hypercores guarded by 4 big bosses, each of which comes with new revelations that answer the questions of what happened to the Earth, why the humans fled to space, what created the Naytibas, and so on and so forth. None of the reveals were particularly surprising, and while the back half of the story is a little bit more interesting once all the cards are laid out on the table, any emotional moments fell flat for me because of a near complete lack of character building in the front half. And this is really the biggest issue with Stellar Blade's story. Its characters lack any kind of personality, charm, charisma, or anything that could have endeared me towards them in any sort of way.
Okay.
After 30 hours, I can barely tell you anything noteworthy about Eve, outside of the fact that she's fiercely dedicated to her mission, she's very close with her fellow 7th Airborne Squad mate Taki, and she doesn't like getting wet.
I'd like to avoid getting wet.
We're never really given any sort of insight as to who she is as a character. She's got no sense of humor, and her interactions with her companions Adam and Lily are incredibly shallow.
I mean, we kind of got that vibe also from the demo as well. But again, I don't think that's why you're playing a game like this. So to me, it's like, it's not that shocking. Yeah, these robots have no personality. You're right. No, it's like justified in the story, perhaps, or in the world and setting why they might be a little bit more flat. Doesn't change the fact that they're flat, though. You know, yeah, with the writing, let me be clear. They are not flat in other ways, but they're flat when it comes to the writing. Okay, I'll shut up.
2 don't fare much better either. Despite the fact that they act like they share a strong bond, it never feels believable because you never really see that bond being formed. Without any of that, it was hard to become invested in Eve, her mission, or Stellar Blade's world in general.
Oh.
Thankfully, the most important part of an action game is the action itself, and Stellar Blade checks pretty much all the boxes when it comes to its combat. It's smoothly animated, challenging, satisfying, has a healthy amount of enemy variety, and while there's a lot of depth, it never became overwhelming in what it demanded of me. You could say that Stellar Blade's combat is derivative, but at the very least, it's derived from one of the best in Sekiro: Shadows Die Twice. Like Sekiro, it is very defense-driven. Enemies are prone to launching into long, uninterruptible combos, and the only way to properly deal with them is to precisely press the block button just before their attacks land to parry each attack one after the other. Every parry you land takes away a point from the enemy's balance, and once their balance is broken, you're able to land a hugely damaging blow that will kill most standard enemies outright and deal massive damage to bosses. Unparryable attacks are clearly telegraphed with flashes of color. A yellow flash means an attack is straight up unblockable and needs to be dodged. A blue flash signals an attack that you can blink past by holding forward and dodging through the opponent to their backside, and then a purple flash is the sign of an attack that can be repulsed, which forces you to hold back and press the dodge button at just the right time to deflect and expose the enemy's weak point. Once again, all of this is very similar to Sekiro's style of telegraphing unblockable moves that either must be jumped over, be Kiri countered, or avoided at all costs, and it works just as well here. Developer Shift Up smartly didn't settle for just straight up copying Sekiro's combat either. It adds its own twists in the form of beta skills, which are a series of 4 special attacks that Eve can use for specific purposes, including a wide sweeping attack that hits multiple enemies, a triple stab attack that does massive single target damage, a shockwave type move that hits enemies at a distance, and a shield breaker that deals extra damage to an enemy's armor. These attacks can be used by spending beta energy, which is gained by
Beta. I mean, I remember during the demo, there was an issue where there was a little bit of too much latency between when you would press the sort of parry block button and when it would actually register. And I remember them saying that they were patching it to fix it. Did they fix it? Anybody in chat know? Because it was just a little bit annoying, just like annoying enough for you to notice it. You know, is there still input delay? I mean, I guess we don't know because the game's not technically out yet, but this seemed like a game that would be significantly better on PC if you could play it at like 120 frames or whatever and basically no input latency at all. It wasn't fixed. You just forget about it or get used to it. I don't know. It was enough that it was bugging me. Like, I remember I was filming that video and there were a few times fighting that boss where I was like, okay, like that didn't feel that great. Because I mean, the age old thing with these types of games, as I and many other people have said for a long time, is that they're only fun if they're fair. Like, if it feels unfair, it feels unfun. It's really not more complicated than that. It sounds, extremely simple because it is. The moment that you start to feel like something is happening that's like beyond your control, or that something in the game isn't working quite right, you just give up on it. Like it creates this disconnect. And sometimes that can happen with maybe like hitboxes where you're like, I dodged out of range of that attack and they did a ground slam and it traveled 30 feet and hit me, when last time I could have sworn it only went 10 feet. It's really inconsistent. Or they sweep and I'm clearly not touching the weapon, but it still dealt damage. Things like that can feel really unfair. And the other thing that can feel unfair is when there's input latency and you're pressing the button, but it's not reacting as quickly as you might want it to. If you get used to it, your brain can kind of compensate and just do it earlier, press the button earlier. But and maybe that is something as you play the whole game, you just get used to it and you're fine. By the end of the demo, I had a pretty good feeling of it, but it was just annoying enough that it bugged me just a tad.
Landing hits and parrying strikes. So you're well incentivized to engage with the enemy as opposed to just running away and sneaking in a hit when you can.
That guy's trippy.
Speaking of those enemies,
Ooh, baby. Dude, their enemy design in this game is so good, though. And unique, too. Like, the weird saw blade head dudes. Like, it's just very unique. I don't know what style this is, if there's a name for it, but it's super, super cool. And it's just refreshing to get a game like this that has different enemy designs, and it doesn't feel like it's just trying to, like, rip off something From Software's done.
One of the areas in which Stellar Blade particularly excels in is its enemy variety and design. There are more than 48 different types of Naytiba to fight against, and while some of them are only slight variations of each other with different weapons, at least those different weapons have their own combos and techniques that you need to learn in order to properly deal with them.
Jeez, dude.
Boss fights are great too, with intense battles against huge and aggressive monsters that always had me on the edge of my seat. Combat felt fresh all throughout the 30 hours it took me to beat it. Partially because of the aforementioned enemy variety, but also because at just about every major chapter in the campaign, I would get a new tool or mechanic that changed up how I approached certain encounters. There's a wrist-mounted drone that could fire a bunch of different ammo types from a distance, along with new mechanics like burst skills that added yet another layer of resource management and became critical for tough fights. Burst skills are similar to beta skills in that they are special attacks that require energy to use, but they are more powerful and typically result in an enemy being slumped on the ground. To balance that added strength, burst energy is much harder to build, requiring you to either perfectly dodge enemy attacks, successfully use a blink or repulse, or by spending a point of your beta energy to use a beta chain, which essentially exchanges the two resources. It was fun to make on-the-fly decisions about whether to spend 2 points of beta energy on a less powerful beta skill, or spend a single point to gain a point of burst energy and then use a much stronger attack later. This
is one of those things that makes the game sound far more complicated than it is. Like, when you're playing it, it's very fluid and you're like, yeah, I'm going to do this and then do that. But in the moment, you're like hearing this like explained verbally and it's like, oh my God, so I have to like do mental math and calculate if I want to do it, but it's really not that bad. It just sounds bad.
Considerations like these that really make some of the tougher bosses in Stellar Blade sing. Not to mention the fact that the burst skills themselves just look cool as all hell.
Oh, baby.
The cherry on top of all this excellent action is the exceptional soundtrack, which features everything from blood-pumping bangers during boss battles to beautiful, ear-tingling melodies while exploring its desolate world. When you're not hacking away at Stellar Blade's horrific-looking Naytima monstrosities, you'll be doing some light RPG activities like exploring Zion, mankind's last bastion of civilization, restocking at shops, changing your hair, picking up quick and light requests from a bulletin board, or taking on meteor side quests from NPCs. True to everything else in Stellar Blade, none of these tasks were particularly interesting from a storytelling perspective, save for one involving a man and his love for a broken-down singing android.
What? Is that so?
They do occasionally culminate in a big round 2 fight against a stronger version of a boss I had previously fought, but outside of those few moments, I quickly found myself tired of the side quest grind. First off, many of these side quests have you returning to old levels in order to reach a specific spot to either pick up some sort of note or item to deliver back to the quest giver. While this is mostly fine in the more open-ended zones where there's a map and numerous fast travel points to make travel much less of a chore, it is an absolute pain when it comes to the linear levels where you have nothing to guide you but a blip on your compass. Most of the time, virtually nothing has changed in these levels either, so it's literally just retracing your steps through the same level, minus any of the surprises you might have encountered on your first time through, all to collect a single item that you weren't able to pick up before.
I don't know what you're talking about. In Starfield, that was my favorite part. It was just running for 5 minutes straight without doing anything. You thought we were going to do a segment without talking about Starfield? No, baby. Of course we were. Of course we were going to bring it up.
What makes this worse is that very rarely did I ever feel the effort was worth the trip. Most of the time, the rewards are just gold and EXP. EXP is great, as level ups give you skill points to explore more of Stellar Blade's well-developed skill trees. But later on, which was when the side quest fatigue started to settle in, skill points were less exciting because the remaining upgrades were either skills I had passed on because I didn't really feel like I needed them, or they felt like very incremental stat increases on moves I didn't use very often, or were just extremely situational upgrades.
I think the whole thing with side quests, though, is that they are optional. That's kind of the point of side quests, is like, you don't have to do them if you don't want to. So I agree. We should all hope that side quests are all great and have stories tied to them and are all like enhancing your experience elsewhere. And it sounds like some of the side quests are that good and do have some interesting stories tied to them, like the one he mentioned with the guy that's in love with the broken down singing android. But some of them are just going to be chances to go and re-explore areas you've already been to. I think that's pretty typical. I also don't think that this is I don't think this has a lot of Metroidvania style elements where like you unlock an ability, you go back through a previous level, and now you can take a different path or unlock new doors. I think it's a little bit different. Incremental increase in stats. Let me Valhalla energy. Oh, you mean
Assassin's Creed Valhalla.
Yeah, Valhalla was another animal entirely, though, because like it's one thing if you get a 5% increase to damage dealt through melee attacks or something. In Valhalla, it was straight up like plus 0.73% damage because like it was all algorithmic as far as I can tell. So like they had a spreadsheet that calculated each level you go up by 0.3 times or 1.3 times, and so you multiply that out and it filled out this massive skill bush. It wasn't even a tree, it was a skill bush, and there were just so many. Like I forget what the max level in that game is, but it's like 300 or 350 or 400, some of them stupid like that. Like there's so many freaking levels and points to apply in that game, it's crazy.
Then there's gold, which for the most part is a useless currency in the latter half of the campaign. It's used pretty much exclusively for refilling consumables or getting more crafting components, which I practically never had to do because you find so many of all of those things just by opening treasure chests and breaking boxes. Thankfully, exploration fares much better. The 2 open zones of Stellar Blade aren't enormous, but they are densely packed with hidden collectibles and fun enemy encounters that always made me want to thoroughly explore as much as possible before making a break for the objective marker. There are collectible cans that can be returned to your base for a variety of rewards. core parts that increase your max health and energy, robot loot pinatas that contain all sorts of goodies, exoskeletons that greatly affect your stats and can affect your approach to combat, and of course 30 or so outfits that you can use to change Eve's appearance. There is an impressive variety among those costumes. So for every skimpy swimsuit or super tiny miniskirt, there's also a classy dress or stylish outfit that makes Eve look like, as my wife puts it, an insta-baddie. I always look forward to finding a new skin.
He's like, I swear to God, I'm married. Chill out, I'm married. I think that's the first time I've ever heard somebody mention their wife in an IGN review, which is a little funny. It's a little funny, just a tad.
And truthfully, it's very satisfying to have another big action game outside of Insomniac's Spider-Man series that features really high quality unlockable cosmetics that you don't have to purchase with real money microtransactions.
Yeah, isn't that refreshing? Dude, it's crazy when you look at a lot of games now, even just like single player adventure games on the AAA level. All of the cool outfits or unique outfits are locked behind paywalls and stuff, or like pre-order bonuses and stuff like that. I mean, there's other games that have it, but it's locked behind grind. Like Jedi Survivor, you had to go and hunt all over the maps for like different haircuts and beards and all sorts of stuff. I remember like working really hard in Jedi Survivor to get to a platform that had a chest or crate or whatever it was in it. And I was like, okay, this is going to be something really, really cool, because this was not easy to get to. And I got there and I go up to it. I open up the chest and it's like, congratulations, you got sort of a weird ducktail mullet. I was like, what? It's kind of frustrating. I was like, why can't I like just have a different haircut? Is that too much to ask? Like everything has to be tied to like either grind or making me pay for it. Maybe I'm insufferable. Maybe I can't be happy. Maybe that's the problem. I'm the problem.
One other feather in Stellar Blade's cap is that it mixes up its gameplay fairly well. Occasionally you'll have to go deep underground into a creepy lab where your scanner and sword don't work, turning it into a genuinely spooky survival horror style game. There are also some cool Uncharted-like action sequences, as well as a good mix of linear and non-linear level design. Not all of these breaks from combat hit, and the platforming heavy sections are particularly annoying whenever they come up, but they nonetheless do a good job of relieving the monotony that would come from just going fight to fight with nothing in between. After beating Stellar Blade, it's also worth mentioning that there's no New Game Plus at launch. It will be coming down the line as free DLC, but right out of the gate, there's not much waiting for you at the end beyond a hard mode that doesn't really seem to change much outside of the enemies hitting you harder. This is especially frustrating because...
Have I not seen that outfit yet? That's great. That's awesome. Just a gigantic, like, teddy bear waifu. That's great.
Once you beat the game, your save file with all of your unlockables, costumes, and other collectibles is basically stuck at the final boss fight. You can't take those costumes over with you to a new game, forcing you to do an entirely fresh playthrough outside of one new costume that you get for beating the game, and you can't even skip cutscenes on your subsequent playthroughs.
Oh, really? That is a bit of an oversight. I mean, some games, like I would imagine this one too, they use cutscenes to cover load screens. That's like something Naughty Dog did all the time, where you'd be watching a cutscene and you're like, okay, well, I'm taking in the story. But if you've ever tried to like speed run a Naughty Dog game, or you've played it enough that you want to just skip through cutscenes, you'll notice you skip the cutscene and then there's a big load screen that happens. And that's because that's happening behind the cutscene. While that's playing out, they're loading in the next level and everything. So it's not as simple as just hitting the skip button or whatever. The promise of the PS5 was to kind of get over that because of the SSDs and stuff. But I think it's sucky that even in subsequent run-throughs, you can't even try to skip cutscenes. Because like you've been there, done that. You know what's happening. You just want to get to the gameplay.
Stellar Blade stands out as a gorgeous and well-crafted action game with very impressive strengths and very clear weaknesses. Both its story and characters lack substance, and some of its RPG elements are poorly implemented, like dull side quests that very often force you to retrace your steps through previous levels, with very little done to make the return trip feel unique or rewarding. But its action picks up most of that slack thanks to the rock-solid fundamentals of its Sekiro-inspired combat system, a deep well of hideous monstrosities to sharpen your sword against, and plenty of hidden goodies that do a great job of incentivizing exploration all throughout.
Okay. I mean, honestly, a 7 out of 10 is like lower than I thought they were going to go. after all that. But on their rating scale, it's still considered good. And I would say that after listening to all of that, I would have guessed he was rating it good or like great, somewhere in that range. So somewhere between 7 and 8. So it's on the lower end of what I was expecting, but still it's there. People in the comments are like freaking out about it. But I mean, like I said, even if you take exactly what's just been said as spoken word fact, he's still saying that the combat's really good, the fundamentals of gameplay are really good, and that's all anybody was really hoping for with this game. I mean, if you were expecting some like really intense, captivating story, you might be disappointed at the end of the day, but still. He took my thing.